I got a 12-year-old John who was at the game. I can't believe that. I'm thinking, like, are you serious? That hat you had was crazy, man.
I brought it right here.
Oh my gosh.
So I think it's 82. You know, it's these painter hats. I don't know if you're like in the early 80s, painter hats.
I remember those well. I remember them so well.
So it's got tiny on it, which means it's not 84, but it also has.
Yeah, that would have been 81. But you were how old were you then? 10?
It's got Danny, so I think it's 82.
Yeah. How old you been 10 years old?
I'm 40. I'm 48. I was born in 72. So I would have been 9 or 10. I mean,
we're just going to roll right now. We're just going to talk our way through it. But go ahead and explain to me what you're talking about with the Celtics.
So I grew up in Carlisle, Massachusetts. I was a huge sports fan, huge. And if you were, so 78 was when the Red Sox lost to the Yankees in the Bucky Dent home run game. But after 78, no one was good except the Celtics. If you were a sports fan in Boston in the early 80s, it was you guys and nothing else. And you guys provided big time. So I was a huge Celtics fan, huge. I mean, I sort of remember the 29 win team, right? So I remember, which I guess was your second year?
Yeah, that was my second year.
So I remember that because everyone knew that Larry was coming during that time. So everyone was sort of excited about the next year. And then the next year, Bird's rookie season was huge, and everyone was just 100% all in. I remember going to a game of the Garden, seeing Pete Maravich that year.
Yes.
And, and then the next year you guys won the championship, and it was just everything. I had a clock radio, the kind that had the sleeper timer on it. So I would go to bed at age 9 and listen to Johnny Most do the play-by-play, and I would have it on timer so that it would turn off after I'd fall asleep probably in the third quarter. But it was great.
Everybody, I want you to help me welcome John Berman in with me. I mean, this is one of my favorite guys in CNN. I've loved you. I'm going to hit you off the top with a couple of good things because you're such a big sports fan. Give me a Mount Rushmore sports.
Meaning players?
Your Mount Rushmore sports. If you were building something in your backyard, you had 4 people you can put on Mount Rushmore, and you can't be wrong. This is your Mount Rushmore sports.
All right. I'll do my Mount Rushmore of all Boston players. Baseball, it's Kevin Youkilis, because I want 2 Mount Rushmore. So okay, I'll do my one honest Mount Rushmore, and then I'll give you a backup.
It doesn't have to be a Boston sports, just sports period.
You have to understand, there's only Boston sports. There's not any other sports besides Boston.
I get it when I talk to you, when I see you on air and Boston plays any teams, you just go, well, Boston, Boston, Boston. So give me your 4.
Okay, it's not an act. Just so you know, it's not an act. It's the real deal. So Youkilis, because it was during that stretch when the Red Sox started winning World Series, and I thought he was such an interesting character and a grinder, and I almost got thrown out of well, that's not true. I did get thrown out of Yankee Stadium because he got hit. A pitcher, I can't remember who threw at him, but someone threw at him, and then I spoke up, and then a guy tried to start a fight with me, and I was the one who got escorted out. So Youkilis, I'll go Brady, which is boring, but it's just if you're a Patriots fan, it's got to be Brady. And then for the Celtics, it was McHale. It was Kevin McHale. I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'10", which isn't very tall, but I was 5'10" in 8th grade. So I was a very tall 8th grader. And so I played center on my 8th grade basketball team. And I thought I had all these low post moves. I had all this thing, this stuff that Kevin McHale could do. And so it was him. And then I had a great big poster of him in my room. And I have to add a 4th, Marvin Hagler.
Wow.
Marvelous Marvin. So, that's an all Boston sports Mount Rushmore. And if I were doing a second round, it would be I would have Rick Burleson, the Rooster.
The Rooster,
I love the Rooster.
Yeah.
I put Jim Rice and Rick Burleson. I have 2 Red Sox on it. For my second Celtics player, it's a hard one. That's a hard one. Let me but Patriots, it would be, someone on defense. I don't know, Willie McGinnis on defense because of winner. And then if I were going for another Celtics, I'd go Paul Pierce, boring Paul Pierce, but just for such a long time and got the.
Well, I mean, you couldn't go wrong. So I love that. I'll ask you one of those other questions we talking about sports related. Now, if you can pick between Marcus Smart and Dennis Johnson, who do you take?
Oh, see, I know this is personal for you. I don't think you have to choose. I think you could say that they both represent brilliance. The defense that they both play. I don't remember, and you'll have to tell me. I mean, Marcus Smart guards centers.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I don't remember DJ doing that, although I know that he was brought to the team largely to guard Magic Johnson, who wasn't a center, but he was 6'9", so it's not guarding a center per se, but DJ had to guard big. Marcus Smart, what he does defensively, I just don't think I've ever seen anyone do that at his height,
Yeah, he's remarkable. When I watch him, like I said, when you put him on a guy like Porzingis and he slows down Porzingis, then you might put him on Curry. So he's like that Swiss Army knife. You just go all over the place with him. I'll start even more because I did my little research on you, and I was like, man, I can't believe this. What is Jeopardy? You were a Jeopardy champion, and that to me, that's fascinating. Was Alex Trebek there? Was he there too?
Yeah. So I'm going to say something that sounds conceited, but it's not. I'm saying it to explain. It was Celebrity Jeopardy, which I'm telling you, okay. But the reason I'm telling you is because it's a dumbed down version. They ask easier questions. They do. I promise you they do ask easier questions on Celebrity Jeopardy. And I was there because I was at CNN. I'm sort of barely a Celebrity Jeopardy. So it was, they fly out there, they tape like 4 or 5 shows back to back to back. And I didn't know who I was playing against. And I show up and Aaron Rodgers was there.
Wow.
And I'm like, I was psyched for 2 reasons. I'm like, oh my God, it's Aaron Rodgers. And I'm like, I'm not judging, but maybe I could beat Aaron Rodgers. I'm just saying, Aaron Rodgers is thinking about other things as I'm thinking about news all day. But I wasn't playing against Aaron Rodgers. I ended up playing against Mo Rocca, who he's a guy who does CBS News. He's a really smart guy, a writer. He's on CBS News. I happened to almost overlap with him in college, and I've known him for 25 years. And unfortunately, he's really smart. And then Wendy McClendon Covey, who's on the Goldbergs and is a terrific actor. She's really funny and really smart. So yeah, look, it was incredibly stressful. It was incredibly stressful and not particularly fun while it was happening because it's just, they ask you the question that comes at you so fast. And everyone's, Mo's so smart and Mo was so quick on the buzzer. And at first I couldn't get my legs under me. One of the first questions when I played the answer was Fenway. And I didn't get it. I mean, I got it, but I didn't get it fast enough. Mo beat me on an answer to Fenway. And I'm like, if I'm losing on Fenway, I'm toast.
I'm done here.
I'm done.
I looked at these people that you've been around and some of the incidents that you've been in, and it's remarkable. Peter Jennings is somebody that I looked at and I was like, man, that is a great anchor man. And then the things I see you a lot like Peter Jennings and some of the things that you say. One of them, I love your line, and I see it on CNN all the time. This is you. You'll say, but you said. And you always do that. And it's very much like you're not slapping anybody, but you're caressing them towards answers. What did you learn from a guy like Peter Jennings?
So I was Peter's head writer for like 2.5 years, from 97 to 99. And when I was hired, I was really young at the game. I was 24 years old, relatively new to the news business. And I was brought in, he had a team of 3 writers on a show, World News Tonight. And I was brought in to be the 3rd writer, the most junior writer who could sort of learn the ropes as things went along. But about a month after I started, one of the guys retired. One of the other writers retired, and one of the other the second guy got moved along. So all of a sudden, I'm 24 years old, the senior writer at World News, and the only writer for about a month and a half. And so it was sink or swim. I'm like, okay, here it goes. And I just remember, I've never worked so hard in my life. I've never tried so hard to not impress somebody. I mean, I guess impress is the right word. I just wanted to do the job well for him. Peter Jennings was the most curious person I've ever met.
Wow.
He just wanted to know more about everything. He always had another question for you. And it's not that he wasn't trusting, but you had to prove it. No matter what you told him, you had to prove it. You had to come with the receipts. And so I learned that from him. The other thing is that you were watching at live news, watching someone do live news, there was no one better than Peter. The world would slow down for Peter Jennings when he was delivering the news. They talk about Ted Williams, when the ball would come to the plate, that he could see the stitches on the ball, right? That the ball would slow down before Ted. Well, that's the way the news was to Peter. The world would slow down as it came into Peter, and he was able to process it and explain it in such a calm way. His ability to be calm in the face of chaos, there's no one like it. I'm not. That's not how I roll. I mean, when there's chaos, I get rattled, which is okay too if it's genuine. Peter, nothing rattled Peter. He was just one cool cat, and he had been everywhere. I mean, because of the way his career arc was, he had been an anchor when he was in his early 20s and failed at it at ABC, which I don't think a lot of people know. He was promoted way high early on. It didn't work out, and then he went on and said, "Okay, I'm going to go be an international correspondent for a while, and I'm gonna go report the crap out of the world." And he did. And so he had been everywhere, and by experiencing all these different parts of the world and knowing all these different people, it made him a better journalist. And it was just such an honor to get to learn next to that. He was demanding, Cedric. I mean, I would write pages for him, and he would edit the pages. He had a black calligraphy pen, and he was the only one allowed to use the black calligraphy pens and he would edit them. And occasionally he would circle words and put a question mark. Sometimes he would circle sentences and say, "huh?" And then other times he would circle things and write "die" on it. So that was his way of saying that he didn't like what you had done.
Wow.
That said, he was terrific to me.
I looked at some of the things, and one of the quotes you made to me was fascinating when you said, "I want to do all the toughest jobs. I want all the tough jobs. And even if there's a risk to it." I was like, really? A risk to it? When is the scariest you've ever been?
Well, that's it. I was embedded with the Marines in 2003 for the invasion of Iraq. I was embedded with a motorized Marine infantry battalion. What that means is mechanized means tanks, which are armored. Motorized means trucks, like just open trucks. And so I was with a battalion of Marines in the back of a truck. There are 20 Marines in the back of this big truck with sitting around with their guns pointed out, and me and a producer in the middle ducking. And that was driving over the border from Kuwait into Iraq. And at that time, I was a very junior correspondent. I was very new at being on air. And the network, I was at ABC News at the time, the network had worked with the military to place all of the reporters and anchors in the right places so that they would be able to tell the best story and see the best things. And they put the most senior people and the anchors where they thought the most action would be, right? And they put the junior people way down at the bottom. Like, okay, we got Berman. He's one extra guy. We'll put him in the rear. We don't think there'll be any action. Well, it's war, and it never works out the way you think. And it turns out that the Marines that I was with saw some of the earliest, fiercest action.
Wow.
And so they rolled over the border into a town called Nasiriyah, and there was a very fierce firefight there. It also was pouring rain, which isn't supposed to happen in the desert.
Yeah.
And so the Marines pulled into Nasiriyah at night. There was all kinds of shooting. Everyone had to dig in. You're digging trenches. That's what war is. For a million years, war has been digging trenches. And the Marines weren't going to dig my trench. The Marines had to fight. So my producer and I were sitting there with our shovels digging as you see these tracer bullets flying overhead, and it's pouring rain. And, I get into this little trench that I did, and there's this much water. And it's nighttime, and I'm just like, where am I? How did I get here? And that night, you talk about Peter Jennings. That night, we couldn't get the picture out, but I called in. We had these satellite phones. I called in to the broadcast, and I remember Peter talking to me live on the air, and he was such a mensch and so good at this. I think he could tell in my voice that I was terrified. And he's like, just tell us what you're seeing. Just walk us through what you're seeing. And it just calmed me down, and it got me in a place to explain what was going on in front of me. That night, the next morning, I remember waking up with mud caked all over me, going to the command post.
Oh, wait a minute, you actually went to sleep?
I mean, no, I say wake up. Whatever happened by the end of the night, the sun came up. I don't know if I had slept or not. It's just, there's not only so much, you can't do anything. I mean, there's stuff flying over your head. All you can do is try to get a picture, and you're on the phone. That's the whole thing. The sun comes up, the shooting dies down. I go to the command post, and I walk in, and I remember it was like a lieutenant colonel, a major, and a couple of captains, and they all look at me, and they say, "So what do you think?" And I'm like, that was some night. And then one of them says, we were all taking bets about whether you'd make it. I'm like, what? What do you think I was going to go? And they all laughed. And then they said something to me that was super nice. They basically said, it doesn't get worse than that. They said, you know what? You made it through. That's the worst of it. If you can make it through that, you can sort of make it through anything. And that calmed me down. What was, being a war correspondent, which I was for a little while, there are different kinds. There are two different kinds. There are people who I think get a rush out of it. Mm-hmm. And for them, it's almost like a drug. I'm not saying not an illicit drug, but they get that kind of charge out of it. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who are scared by it. And I'm in the second category. I mean, I get when people are shooting at me or near me, it scares me. But I think that's okay too. I think both kinds of reporters are important to have. I really do. I think that both perspectives, the gung-ho, and then also the more realistic, hey, wait a second, it's not so great that there's people fighting everywhere.
Do you have other heroes that you look up to? Like my favorite person on news forever was Walter Cronkite. Because when Walter Cronkite spoke, man, I was like, it must be true. Now it just seems like everybody is so, different, and I can't believe it. Tell me the difference between CNN and Fox.
Well, Fox has an agenda. Fox has an agenda. Fox is clearly the network of the right, and they are going on to promote one point of view. CNN is not. CNN is going on to report the truth and report the news. Just tell you the news. In this moment that we're in, what complicates things is that you have an administration that is less tethered to the truth than any before, that says things that are not true more than any administration has before. I'm not saying that other administrations haven't lied, and our job is to, is to speak truth.
That is when you do that line with me. But you said, I love how you do. You sit back, you say, but you said, and then you'll come across with about 5 or 6 different quotes, which to me is absolutely amazing. Backs up everything you're saying.
You just gotta go just do the research. I mean, people need to be accountable for their own words. And I try every time I'm going to an interview to know what someone has said and to have the facts to back it up. In terms of what CNN is, though, now, because you have an administration that just objectively says things that are untrue more than any others, I think it can look to a viewer like we do have an agenda. Well, we do. Our agenda is the truth. That's the agenda. The agenda is the truth. Carl Bernstein, the great Watergate journalist, what he says is that journalism is the best obtainable version of the truth. The best obtainable version of the truth. That's what we should strive to be. We should always strive to get as close to the pure truth as we can. It's imperfect sometimes. Sometimes we miss or we only get part of it, but we try to get as much of it as we can, as quickly as we can.
The hardest question I'm gonna ask you today is, tell me what you like that Donald Trump has done during this administration.
So I'm going to try to find a way to answer this diplomatically because it's not my job.
This is my podcast. I don't care. You can answer the way you want to.
Because here, I'm going to start this with a preamble. That question would be hard to answer for me, no matter who's president, right? It's not for me to like or not like what a president of any party does. So I'm trying to think what I think Donald Trump has done that is unique or unique to him that I think has been positive in a way for that. I think that there has been, there are people in this country who feel as if they have been left behind by different things that have happened in the country, largely manufacturing and trade issues that have become more globalized, and the world has passed them on. And I think that there was an attitude among Republicans and Democrats, well, you know what, the world has changed, you've got to change with it. And I think that the parties were not speaking to these people in a way that they could relate to. And I think Donald Trump has spoken to them in a way that they can relate to. And I think that that's a positive thing. I think understanding that there are people who feel as if that this country has not been working for them is a positive thing. One other thing that he's done inadvertently that I think is important is that, our country is governed, and that's a small g, by laws and norms. There are laws which dictate how things are supposed to happen. It turns out that a lot of the way that America's been working for 200 and whatever years is not by law, it's by norm, it's by tradition. And what Donald Trump has just said, you know what, if it's not a law, screw it, I'm going to break it. If it's just a norm, if you're going to tell me that it's only because it's a norm that I should or shouldn't do this, I don't care. And I think that we all now understand more how it has been just these norms and traditions that have governed us. And I think people have a better appreciation of if they want things to be a certain way, they better pass laws. They better not just count on a president behaving a certain way if there's no law to restrict him or her.
Have you been offended by some of the things he said to some of your colleagues?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's just out of the way. I mean, it's like, what do you guys go back to the back and can you believe he said that?
Look, I think I'm on the side of journalism and I'm on the side of truth. And it's not like I don't have a rooting interest in journalism and truth. And a lot of these people are my friends. So I think it's completely inappropriate when he attacks journalists. Now, it's not something that I think it's worth focusing on too much. What I always say is that if we're focused too much on the president's attacks on us, then we're not covering the news, right? And when he's attacking us, he's not doing anything for the American people. It's both the president and journalism in general. If that's all we're focused on, we're not doing the work we should be necessarily. So I think we have to have broad shoulders and just move on. I don't need people to like me. It's not nice, but I don't need it. That's not why I'm in the business. So I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind in the sense that people can say what they want. And I get it. There will be times when I get criticized by the right and the left, and that's just the way it is. And you can move on. When the president is attacking us, he's not focusing on the problems facing the American people, period. And when we're focused on those attacks, we're not focused on the problems facing the American people by and large. I am concerned, and I do think that someone needs to point out, it needs to be pointed out, that it's not just an attack on journalism. I think sometimes what the president is trying to do is destroy the concept of truth. Yeah. If there is no truth out there, then you can do whatever you want. If you blow up the concept that there is something that's objectively factual, then you can do things with impunity. And I think it's a dangerous place to be.
Has there been, and I probably just automatically going to be no, has there ever been anything like 2020? This is absolutely bananas. When you think about all the things that have gone down from the pandemic to Black Lives Matter, the Kobe Bryant passing, to it's just on and on and on. This year just will not stop. The pandemic is just enough, and now you have an election. the world almost got hit by a meteorite. It's like, what is next? I mean, this year is crazy.
Locusts. The locusts are coming, no doubt. The locusts are, the pandemic in and of itself is obviously a once in a, not even a generation, a multi-generational thing. So no, I mean, in my lifetime, there's never been anything like it. And you're only a tiny bit older than me. In your lifetime, there's never been anything like it. Every generation or every couple generations has a challenge, an existential challenge. Thank God we haven't had a world war.
Not yet. Hold on.
Knock on wood. I mean, I'm hoping. This year is bonkers. This year is just bonkers. To see the pandemic all around us, to see people in masks, to see people in their houses and not coming out. I mean, can you remember back to March and April what it was like? I mean, it was just like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It was the Twilight Zone. And it's almost, sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my head around that now you have a relative level of normalcy. And that was just a couple months ago.
I have such anxiety about this year and all the things that have happened. Where were you when Kobe Bryant, passed away, and how did you get the news?
It was a Sunday, right? It was.
Yeah, I was actually, we were in New Orleans going to play the Pelicans, and I wake up to this news.
Yeah, I was home, and on the weekends I don't watch the news. I try not to watch. My job is the news, so I try to separate myself from it. There's very little that will get me to turn on the TV on the weekend, but when that happened, I turned on the TV, immediately to find out, like, oh my God.
Where did you hear the news? I'm just curious. Come to your house, or
get it all?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
You wake up and there's a bullet. I have, and then internally there's CNN emails and blasts that go out. You'll get an email. We're getting reports unconfirmed that X happened. And you just follow it like that. I can't remember exactly if I woke up to it. I can't remember what time of the day it was, but I remember once it became clear what was going on, I went to the TV right away and turned that on. It was interesting, I have to say, is that and I'm a huge sports fan, but I don't think I realized the impact that Kobe Bryant had on this generation of players. I think I knew the impact that players like Magic and Larry and then Michael Jordan had on the game, but then I don't think I realized that for this generation, Kobe Bryant is everything. And that really changed my perspective, I think.
It was kind of, I don't know where to go, but it's kind of strange to see how he was this great beloved figure. Then he went through the situation in Colorado, the sexual abuse, and then he came back to be, and then he became the father, then he became the producer, and then he became Academy Award winner. He just had a magnitude of things that just defied logic the way his life was going.
Yeah, he was a cerebral guy. The way he thought about things, I think, made him deeply interesting and compelling. And you talked about what happened in Colorado. He also did something which is unusual in this era, which is he owned it in a way and apologized for it. Now, it was part of whatever legal agreement he has, but if you go back and read what he wrote, it was a remarkable statement. And that's growing up. I mean, that's growth right there.
You're such a big sports fan. What do you think about the bubble that the NBA is in now? It has been remarkable. You're here to sit, you're looking at baseball and this kind, but the bubble with the NBA and what the commissioner's done has been outstanding.
It's impressive. It shows you, it's such an example of public health. It shows what you can do if when you isolate, and also if you test them, just test the heck out of people. It can be controlled. This virus can be controlled if you take it seriously and handle it in the right way. It shouldn't be a mystery that the NBA has been able to do this because they've been isolating people and testing the heck out of people. And I give the players and the teams a lot of credit for being willing to do this. I mean, they're humans. They want to be with their families. They want to have a life. I've had a chance. I correspond every once in a while with Enes Kanter.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, 50 days. It's a long time. And he's a big guy in a tiny room. But I think it's inspiring that they're doing this. And, and I know it's their job and they're getting paid and it's a game, but so what? It's a job and they have families and they have lives and and plus, not to mention with all the racial stuff happening in the country, which they are deeply invested in, deeply passionately and personally invested in. I know it's hard to be cut off from all that.
Did you ever think that players would be disinvested in anything? Because you look at them from time to time, you see Lorenzo said to LeBron James, shut up and dribble. Now you see all these players with a passionate rage for what is going on.
I'm glad they are. I mean, I think that there's a platform to use, and I'm glad to see that players are using it. I'm a student of history, so and you are also. I know it was before my time, but obviously in the 60s and the early 70s, I know that was something that was a big part of sports. Obviously, Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, the 68 Olympics. There are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Politics and sports for a long time were very
Muhammad Ali.
Yep, very, very intertwined, absolutely intertwined. And then I think there was a period where they were more separate for a while, and now they're back together again. And I think it's good. I think that it's very good. It's understandable too, right? I mean, if in a league that is obviously the vast majority of young African-American men, when you're having a moment in our country that disproportionately impacts young African-American men, it's not removed. This isn't an abstraction. This is not an abstraction to these players in any way. I mean, this is something that's very real.
Say, I'm going to use a name, and then I want you to go with this. Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is a guy who is just deeply committed to science and medicine, who I don't think has ever claimed to be perfect. The most interesting period of Dr. Fauci's life isn't necessarily even coronavirus, although obviously it's fascinating. It's AIDS. It's what he did to fight AIDS and how he, in a way, learned over time and worked with largely the gay community to understand what they were feeling and help make the science more accessible to them and work to save lives in the battle against AIDS. And that was a remarkable journey. He was vilified at the beginning of the AIDS struggle by the gay community and now beloved. And that's a long way to go. With coronavirus and Anthony Fauci, all he wants is to save lives. All he wants is to beat this thing. And I don't think he ever imagined a universe where he would ever be, where what he was doing would be seen as political. And I think he's just confused by it.
Kamala Harris.
I had a chance to interview her some during the primaries. What interests me most about Kamala Harris is her background, right? Growing up with a Jamaican father and an Indian mother in Berkeley, right? Or in Oakland, with all that stuff going on around you, how that forms you and how that...
You know what, that was funny to me, and didn't mean to cut you off, but it was funny to me when somebody from Fox said India, and they were like, she's Indian? Like she's American Indian? No, she's not American Indian. That's not it.
I mean, and she's got, her mother is Indian, and she's got grandparents in India, or family in India that she grew up, she used to travel to India as a child growing up, and that's very much a part of her life. I think that's the American story in a way. One of the things, when Pete Buttigieg was running for president, people would joke, well, why can't we just have an easy name like Smith? I'm like, well, wait a second. I mean, you guys are all laughing and making a joke out of this, but it's American. I mean, the most American thing in the world is to have messed up names. That's what we are, right? I mean, I want names like Buttigieg. I want, the vast panoply of the world coming into the United States. And, that's who we are. So I think it's inspiring, independent of the politics, I think it's inspiring to see the changing face of representation.
Yeah, I did something, you'd love this. I want to say it was the Democratic National Convention when it was in Boston. I am there, And I'm going through all the little people speaking to me. Max, how are you doing? And, I'm just having a good time. Well, probably about, maybe about 15 minutes of being there, all of a sudden I get tired and I want to go home. I go home and then I hear about a guy who just spoke, and it was Barack Obama. I walked out on his speech. I can't believe it.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, 2004 in Boston, that was a time, and that was a speech that launched a career. A guy was a state senator, just a state senator at that point, and then 4 years later, he's president.
Give me, and I'm wrapping it up here, but can you give me 5 people that you've been so impressed with? Because sometimes I'm just shocked when I meet somebody. I'm like, oh my God, I want to meet Barack Obama. I never have, but it's just, do you have 5? Because you're in the news all the time and you see people all the time.
5's hard. Well, first of all, Cedric Maxwell.
Okay,
look, I promise I'll answer the question, but I can't tell you how cool it was when you reached out to me. I'm like, Cedric Maxwell's reaching out to me? It's the coolest thing ever. You have to appreciate that this is, the formative years of my life. I remember where I was for the 81 finals. I remember where I was when you put the team on your back in the 84 finals. This stuff is like such a part of my life. And then to have you reach out to me like, wait a second, how is this working? This isn't the way it's supposed to be. So, okay, that aside, Stephen Sondheim, Stephen Sondheim is a great Broadway. He composes and he writes lyrics to some of the great musicals of all time. I had the opportunity to interview him and go to his home. He's one of the great lyricists ever, with the lyrics to West Side Story and Gypsy, and the music and lyrics to Sunday in the Park with George and Sweeney Todd. And he, it's like you're meeting Einstein. It's the guy. There's no one better at it, and no one ever has been better at it than him. So I got to go to his house, and a lot of times you meet people, and they don't necessarily measure up to your view of what they would be, or they're not nice. I mean, I'm a sucker for nice people. I like people who are nice, right? And who and also are interested in you and will answer your questions and will engage with you. And he was super nice. And I was in his townhouse and I saw his piano where he writes all his music. And next to his piano, he had a rhyming dictionary. And I'm like, Stephen Sondheim, you write the most famous lyrics in the world. Why do you need a rhyming dictionary? He goes, you need help. I mean, you can't, everyone needs a crutch every once in a while. And I just love that. I love the idea that even Stephen Sondheim needs a rhyming dictionary. So that was great. Stephen Sondheim was terrific. There's a in Massachusetts. There's a chorus called Young at Heart, the Young at Heart chorus, which it's in Western Mass, and it's senior citizens. It's senior citizens who sing rock and roll music.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. And I got to go profile them. And it was just inspiring because you see all these people in their 80s just totally jamming, rocking out. And I love that. I just love the idea that I'm not going to let boundaries or barriers hold me back. What else? I mean, I covered a lot of politicians. I'm not going to say that any of them they're not in my Mount Rushmore necessarily. Okay. But I did look. I covered the Bush campaign in 2000 from beginning to end, from like the very beginning to the very end, and that was an experience that was just formative and amazing to see a candidate from the beginning grow all the way through the first months of the presidency. So that was George W. Bush, and I had that. I got to meet John Lewis once. I got to, and this is interesting because. And I think you can relate to this because you meet a lot of people too. When you're a journalist, you're supposed to be cynical and you're supposed to go in and, and not care, like, oh, you're so-and-so, I don't care. I'm going to ask you hard questions. The one person I met who I ever had to sort of stop and be like, okay, I'm meeting them, this is really happening, was John Lewis. And I got to interview him. It was Barack Obama's second inauguration. It was after his reelection in 2012, and I was on the Mall by the Capitol, and John Lewis walked up, And, you know, you are watching a man and you are talking to a man who gave everything and was willing to give everything. And it's just, I think everyone he ever met probably had the same feeling I did, which is you're not worthy. I think it was Joe Biden. I think it was Biden after John Lewis died said something that really struck me, which is that when you're with John Lewis, you have this overwhelming sense that you haven't done enough, right?
Yeah.
Because of how much he was willing to do. So John Lewis absolutely was that for me. And I'm trying to think if there was anyone else who was a sort of a top, I don't know. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of.
Yeah, I've been around all these different situations, and like you said, meeting people and doing things. Boston Marathon, the bombing. I was there at the finish line and walked away literally 6 minutes before the bomb exploded. And it just shows you how life really is. I walked into Nordstrom's Rack on Boylston Street, picked up a pair of shoes, heard the first explosion. Then we hear another explosion. I come back out and it is just chaos. And I see almost the exact place I was standing is where the bomb went off. And it just shows you how delicate and how squeezy life can be from time to time.
You know, it absolutely. My sister's office is on Boylston Street, just above the finish line there. You know, I ended up going up. I was there that night. You know, that happened obviously in the afternoon, and then I got on the train and went to Boston right away. And I don't think people who aren't it took people who weren't from Boston a while to realize that was an attack on the heart of the city. And that was an example. Talk about an example of people doing amazing things. Just everyone rushing to the streets to treat all the people who'd been affected and been hurt by that. I met a family. I will tell you that one of the families, I met a family where the father and the son both suffered serious injuries from that bombing, and they were inspiring. And the son went back and ran the marathon the very next year. So that, you know, that was I didn't realize you were at the finish line.
Yeah, I was at the finish line, and then, you know, it's just, I think about my life, and I always say, what next? After this year, I'm thinking, only thing I haven't seen is a mushroom cloud, and I hope I don't see that, but my goodness, I think about 9/11, the day it happened, and it just changed our country altogether. Now, is this going to be another 9/11 moment? Is it going to be Black Lives Matter? Is it going to be the Me Too movement? I mean, it's just, seems like it's such a collection. Is this the time? Is this the time we're going to make a stance and change a lot of different things in this world? It seems like that's the case.
Do you think so?
I believe that there is. What I believe about this is that we're all brick masons, and we're putting bricks in the wall one by one. We have to get a foundation, and once we get the foundation, everything starts from there. But I don't think that racism or anything like that is going to be stopped on Thursday or Friday or next week. It's something that has to continue on. And George Floyd and everything that has happened, the year has just been unbelievable. And then to top it off, I'm actually speaking to one of the people that I really love. I mean, you were on my TV in the morning. You know, when you're on at night, I'm like, man, he's not supposed to be on at night. And D. Lemon, and I've been on CNN before. I've done some things, but to have you on my show, you know, John, is I totally appreciate it. And you know, if there's anything, matter of fact, I have a gift that I'm gonna send to you. You know, I got a picture of myself and Larry Bird that was signed that I'm actually send that to in your office.
That's, you know, like I have my hat still. I mean, this is you know, put the hat on. You know, my wife, this hat, I don't know, I'm bad at math. I mean, have this hat's 40 years old, right?
And it still looks good though. That's what I'm saying.
She gets so mad when I keep stuff like this. And then my wife grew up in Vermont and wasn't a basketball fan. And I've been trying to explain to her for the last week about why I'm so giddy about the fact that you reached out to me. I'm like, you don't understand. And then I pulled out the hat. She's like, what is that hat? And why do you still have it? I'm like, if I didn't have it, I wouldn't be able to show Cedric Maxwell that I have this hat.
Oh.
From 1982. I mean, what happened in 19? I can't remember the 82 season.
Well, actually, that year we got Danny. We lost. I want to say the Philly, and then it was just back and forth. And then we have, to me, probably what I always say is the shining moment is playing the Lakers. Because even today, I always say it took me 25 years before I've ever spoken again to James Worthy. I had him on my podcast, and we actually talked, and it wasn't bad. I didn't throw up, and I thought I was just going to heave after I talked to him, or I felt like I was going to have to take a shower. But he was really nice, and we had a great conversation.
Is he from North Carolina also?
He's from Gastonia, and I played basketball. My college, I went to UNC Charlotte.
Right.
So he was right down the street. Matter of fact, he told me, said, man, I came to your game and saw you play in college. I saw you play. I was in high school. I saw you going against Robert Parrish in Charlotte. So it was,
really?
Yeah. My thing I shared with you, this is one of my favorite stories. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we were doing, it was the Celtics, Lakers, and they were doing a whole thing about the series, and they did ESPN 30 for 30. And it shows you how people grow. I'm on the court maybe 2 or 3 years ago afterwards, and Jason Tatum, we had just got him as a rookie, he comes up to me, goes, cornbread. I was like, what is wrong with you? He said, man, I saw you on that 30 for 30. Damn, you were bad. History about the game repeats itself, and it's something that, I really love, and I love sharing it with people, and your story is going to go a long ways, and nothing but luck to you. And
can I ask, like, since I never get to talk to Cedric, can I ask like 2 basketball questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Is there any player who you think plays like you now? Because it's such a unique style. It was such a unique style of play. Really, I mean, I talked about Kevin McHale, how he had a one-of-a-kind game. So did you. Yeah. No one else played like you.
The person I think that I would say most plays like me, or I play like them right now because I handle the ball and I scored and all of that, might be Draymond Green.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving the basketball around, getting it to the proper people, being able to score, coming up in big moments. That would be the person I'd say I would say would be more like me than anybody now.
Weren't there times even early with Bird that the offense ran through? I mean, you were one of the first options occasionally in the post, and then it would get kicked out again. Yeah?
It was that. When my first game ever with Larry Bird, I always remembered it. My first practice, I'm sitting there thinking like, there's no way this guy can be this good. I'm thinking in my mind, I was like, this is great white hope. It can't be like this. And I see him out there. He knocks down the first 5 or 6 jump shots. And after practice, I got to the first black person I could see and like, you know what? That damn white guy can play. So, and I always say that God's a funny God, and because a lot of players of color, they were very, very prejudiced and saying, oh, we're the only ones can play. Well, God's a funny guy. He doesn't give me just Larry Bird, but he gives me Kevin McHale too. So I'm saying, man, God, please, just what are you doing to me?
But with Bird, I don't. If a guy's getting you the ball in a play, what do you shoot? You shot 600 from the floor, right?
Shooting 60% was the first forward in the history of the NBA to ever do that, and I did it twice.
Yeah, I mean, so you were doing something right, and I think that the guys you played with were smart enough to know that if a guy's shooting 60% from the floor, I'm going to get him the ball near the hoop.
The ball, yes.
Anyway, well, thank you for letting me ask those questions.
Dude, thank you very much for coming on with me. It was a pleasure. If there's anything I could do, I'm going to reach out to you, and I'm going to definitely send you that picture.
It's an honor. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to talking to you again. And when the world opens up again and you can all travel again and do stuff, come see us at CNN.
I will do just that, buddy. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks, Cedric.
Bye-bye.